Okay, so for this week's tutorial, alcohol marker tutorial, I'm going to be coloring this page. It is from If Mermaids Are Real. This is a coloring book that I created that represents all body types, cultures, and medical conditions. Well, not all, but a lot. So this one has a glucose meter attached to her belly. So that's how this one is inclusive. So I thought this was a really good example because there's lots of flowers, there's hair, she's got a tail, there's some greenery. It's kind of a good compilation of a bunch of different things that we can work on today. So as always, I have my custom color chart, and I'll be using this as a reference for my alcohol markers. Everything that you see here you can find in my links. So let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is pick some colors. And before you do anything with any coloring book, regardless of how thick the pages are, I would always put some pages behind. Okay, so I'm going to put a new page behind. This is a piece of cardstock, but you can put any paper behind. If you're just putting regular printer paper, I would probably double it up just to be sure. Sometimes alcohol markers can be extra juicy, and you want to make sure that you're not oversaturating the paper. So first I'm going to pick some colors for the hair. So this is my mid. So what I always do is pick three colors, three shades of the same color. So I'm going to pick medium orange, a bright orange, and what I'm looking for now is a light orange. Okay, so I don't actually have a super light orange, but I'm going to go with this pale cherry pink. So this is the Belize Suprema, so these are the cheap Amazon alcohol markers. This is Ohuhu, and I always like getting the broad tip and the brush tip, just as a reminder. These ones you don't usually have a choice. They come in broad tip and fine tip. So that's what I'm going to do for the hair. And I don't like to pick palettes ahead of time. I like to pick them one at a time because then I can kind of gauge how it turned out on the paper. So I'm just going to jump right in and start. So the first thing you do with hair is I'm going to go in and put my base layer. So when you're doing alcohol markers, anything with alcohol markers, if you want to really make it stand out, now I'm not doing like a fancy blend, because when you do blending, in order to get a really good blend, the paper needs to be wet, and I would have to do tiny little sections, and that would take me forever. So I'm going to do it the way that I like to do it, but if you're going to blend, you would do the same thing. You just do it in small sections, and maybe I'll do like a little section in a minute so that you can see how that works. So now I'm going to use my broad tip because I have a lot of space to cover, and that will go a lot faster. The brush tip is nice. The reason I like brush tip and broad tip is because with the broad tip you can get a lot of coverage, and when I'm doing art I like to kind of do like strokes in my art. That's the look that I like, but with brush tip you have a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for? You have a lot more versatility because you have the fine tip option of a brush tip, but you don't, but you also can use it for like bigger sections or like wider strokes. So it just allows you a little more versatility in the options. I'm just listening to some bird sounds today. And don't worry too much if you go outside the lines. I never worry about going outside the lines. I guess as an artist, I'm an artist now in my day job, so I don't really worry about going outside the lines because it just adds more character to any piece. And when it comes to art, it's nice to have sort of a messy look. That's the look I like anyway, so I don't really worry about it. So this is actually turning out to be it's actually a pale cherry pink, and that's a good example of how alcohol markers, the caps don't always match, because like, I don't know if you can see that. Let me get a little closer. That's the cap. It's pretty close, but it's a lot darker on the page. So So I actually didn't even consult my color chart on this one because I already know these colors really well. And the more you use your colors, the more you will get to know them and which one does what. I still struggle with my like brick colors though, which is kind of funny. So I have a little page that I keep on my desk just for brick as well. But the color chart book also has sections for palettes. So if you have a particular color palette combination that you like, you can add it. So I might, if I end up liking this a lot, I might go in and add this as a good option for doing ginger hair, I guess is the word I'm looking for. So I'm just continuing the base layer here. This is the most tedious part. It does take a few minutes to get it all covered in. It gets more fun after this. This is like, see, and this is where most people stop coloring, is at this first layer, and that's when it looks kind of flat. I mean, I could stop here, but it's not going to look very nice when I'm done. It's just going to look boring. And you're here because you don't want your coloring pages to look boring. You can use this in your art as well. I learned all of my techniques by coloring, all of my alcohol marker techniques by coloring, and then I moved on to alcohol markers. Okay, so now I've got my base layer down, and I'm going to go in with my light orange. This is my mid-tone. So actually I'm going to use the fine tip. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I really want to make it look dynamic. So I want to identify where on this page I'm going to see shadows and highlights. So if I assume that the light is coming from this direction here, then I know that, and let me grab a pen so we can follow it along. So I know that if the light is coming from this direction, that there's going to be a shadow here, there's going to be a light here, there's going to be a shadow here, it's going to be highlight here, probably a little bit of a shadow here, and same, highlight, a little bit of a shadow, probably a deeper shadow, a little bit of a highlight because it's exposed to the light, highlight, maybe a little shadow. I might have some shadows underneath. So you can see where, so if you just imagine the light is coming from one direction, you can really decide where you want your coloring or where you want your shadows to be. So that's really what I'm doing. And also what I'm doing is deciding how deep I want the shadow to go. So the mid-tone, and I'll do a quick example of this. Let me take my cardstock out. So what we're trying to accomplish here is sort of like this. Oops, wrong side. So this is your light tone, your mid-tone, your dark tone. So this is going to be like those lighter shadows, and this will be in the deepest part of the shadow. And then we might use some grays later to deepen it even further. Okay, so that's what I'm doing now. So we're just really going in and identifying where the shadows are. And this can be your not so deep shadows. And this is also kind of tedious, but this is the fun part of coloring, right? So like I said before, if the light's coming from over here, there would be a kind of a bit of a shadow there. I might have some here. And don't worry if it looks messy now, it's going to look good when we're done. It always sort of looks messy in the beginning, so don't worry about it. So if the light's here, I might have some shadows here, probably here where it's kind of coming out. And you don't even have to get this detailed if you don't want to. So you might want to just, maybe you just want to do some highlights. So I'm switching to my chisel tip just because I know I have a lot of coverage to do here, and I don't want it to take forever. So I'm making her roots look a little bit darker, which they often are, and if she's a mermaid, she's probably getting sun-bleached hair here and there, so it kind of makes sense. And you know what, I might stick to my chisel tip, and then you can see how I kind of make it go faster. It does look a little bit messy at first, but you can, and remember, the light's coming from this way, so I'm making sure all the shadows are on this side of everything. So like here, I might do a little bit there because it's touching. There. Oop, see, now I feel like that went a little too thick, so I'm switching back to my fine tip. And this is not a perfect process. You're going to learn as you go. And this little flower in her hair would probably be casting a bit of a shadow. So I'm going deeper than I want the deepest shadow to go, because I'm going to put a darker shadow closer. Same with this here. Probably do this one too while I'm at it. And I am getting, you can tell that I'm going over the lines there. That's okay. I'm not going to worry about that too much right now. So don't worry if you don't get it perfect. So, I mean, we are trying to imagine where the light is, but we also are deciding that this is not going to be, like, art is never perfect, and this is your imagination. So don't be too hard on yourself if you feel like you made a mistake or something. It's all part of the process. And I do custom art for a living now. That's my full-time job. And I make mistakes all the time, and it's very easy to hide them or cover them up, and nobody really even knows they're there. So don't worry about it too much. If you're always worried about making mistakes, you're never going to have any fun. And coloring is not supposed to be stressful. It's supposed to be the de-stressor of your day, right? So again, I'm just going in these little, like where I imagine the shadows would be. This one might be a shadow because the hair is covering, like this part of the hair is covering that. Same with here. It's kind of like tucked into a fold. There we go. So we're almost done this side. So you can tell that didn't really actually take as long as I thought. And then again here there's a little fold, so I'm gonna add a little texture, and then this a little bit of hair coming out of the corner there. And this is kind of tucked behind her arm, so I might add a little there. And you could even, if you wanted to, you could go in and do all these little lines like this. Some people like to trace the lines, and there's nothing wrong with that at all, because there would be some overlap. Like here you might. So that side's pretty well done. I don't know about you, but I tend to be a little bit impatient. I don't like having big areas to color, so this is pretty well where my limit lies, is something like this. I like doing art with lots of space, but I don't, when it comes to coloring, I'm not a really big fan of spending a ton of time coloring one thing, which is one of the reasons that I don't do a lot of gel pen stuff. A lot of people ask me to do gel pen stuff, but I have ADHD, I'm not in the mood. So again, I'm just trying to find where I think the shadows would be. So this is like kind of tucked behind her arm. I know that we said the light's coming from this way, but like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. And most artists well, I don't want to say most, I don't want to speak for other artists, but many artists are not that picky about, like they don't really beat themselves up about where the shadows are. Now, that depends obviously on the type of artist, but I don't really beat myself up over it. I do it the best I can. And I'm not like in the Louvre or anything, so I'm just doing stuff for people. I do homes and vehicles for people. It's custom art. So, okay, so this would have a little shadow because it's sort of tucked behind her ear and it's under this little flap of hair, so it would be kind of a little bit darker. And the nice part is when you've done this mid shade, then you already have a template for your next color. So again, I'm just finding the little shadows. See how much more dimension that has? It's just so much nicer. And then this is a little bit tucked behind there. There might be a little shadow there. See how this little piece is kind of, it looks like it's a fold. And this is coming from behind that piece of hair. And this might have a little bit because it's tucked underneath. And I'm just going to go back and do a quick look just to make sure I didn't miss anything that I want to add. Sometimes too, I find if you are struggling to figure out where you want to add things, I know this seems silly, but take a picture of it with your phone and send it to someone, or just look at, walk away and then look at the picture. Oftentimes I find my errors, or I find little things that I should change or fix when I take a picture of it. So, okay, now we're going to move on to our next color. So now we already have our template, so I'm just adding a little bit of extra dimension. So this is just a little bit, like we don't want to do, this is not going to be like recovering everything. We're just kind of doing the deepest recesses of the shadows, like this. Just a little bit there. And then this would be the darkest part of the shadow. Again, right there. Deepest part of the shadow right there. So you just really go to like the root, or wherever you think the darkest part of the shadow would be. This one I might just do the whole thing. I know I said not to do that, but I feel like that would be a dark spot. And then here, so what I'm imagining here is that, say the light's coming here, this would be dark, and then the light would start kind of hitting this hair around here. It might be a little darker there, like that. So it's kind of like the shadow is dark and then it casts a longer shadow, if that makes sense. And if anybody has any questions, please let me know. So again, this would probably be a bit of a darker shadow next to her arm. So see the difference? I'm going to add a little bit, and then I'm going to take a little picture so you can see the difference. I actually might do this whole section here. That would be dark. Like that. Yeah, that looks good. Oh, missed a spot. Okay, so right there. Missed a couple spots, I guess. Okay, so now I'm going to do a quick scan, because I have a tendency to miss spots. So I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. And this is my version of like kind of, I don't want to say walking away, but sort of where I pull back and I just look and see if I missed anything. And 9 times out of 10 I did, so yeah, I like that. I might do a little like that just to frame her face. I think that looks really good. Okay, so now we're going to do the other side. So I'm going to do around this little flower, and like I said before, I'm just doing a little bit of a shadow. Now you could go in after you're done and go in with like a gray to add even more shadow. I don't really like to do that with my coloring though. I like to keep it really vibrant. But maybe when we're done we can see if it makes a big difference or not. Or maybe we can play with that feature, or that technique I should say. Okay, so I'm just going in the little areas. And feel free to color along with me in this book. So I'm just identifying where I think the deepest shadows would be. So learning how to use alcohol markers with coloring is actually how I started my art business. Not saying anybody needs to start an art business or anything, but it is a very low stakes way to learn how to use alcohol markers, because you're not actually producing any art. You're just learning how alcohol markers work. And this is the first set that I ever had, this Belize Suprema, or the cheap. They come in a bunch of different types on Amazon, but that's the first one I ever had. And I've had these for maybe a year now, at least a year, and they're still pretty juicy, so I'm just going to add a couple of extra shadows in there. I think that's looking pretty good. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. So now we're going to do flowers. And I'd like them to be, I'm thinking pink would be a nice flower. So a really good, if you're thinking about color theory, one of my, I don't want to say teachers, but she's sort of a mentor of mine, once told me that if you think about the 3 prime colors, so you have red, I'm just going to use these as an example, blue and yellow. So these are your 3 prime colors. So when you're thinking about adding complementary colors, you want to identify what colors are already in what you're doing and add another tone, or add the one that's missing. So orange is made up of these 2 colors, so I know that I need a blue in this picture at some point. So I'll probably make her tail some version of blue. So I'm not really going to worry about the flowers being blue. I might make these little flowers like maybe a purple or something, but that's a really good way to look at color theory. It's a much simpler way than looking at color wheels, because I know very easily that this color is made up of these 2, and now I need this to sort of complement it. And the green will help with that as well when I start doing the greenery. So, all right, so let's pick some pinks. As you know, I like to always pick 3 shades of the color that I'm working with. So what I'm doing now is I have chosen pale salmon, and you can see the difference in the cap. Even look at the difference in so that's why I like to have these color charts. I picked Cosmos and Cherry Pink. So it's going to be a pretty vibrant little pink flower. So that's what I've chosen, and just like we did before, I'm going to go in and do my lightest color first. So I'm just using my chisel tip for this. What did I do here? Oh no! Uh-oh, see what I did? Darn, that's okay. Oops, I went over the green, but that's okay. Green is a darker color, so it's not gonna be an issue to cover that up. So I'm just going in as fast as I can just to do this lightest color, this pale salmon. I love this pink color. This is one of the first colors that I used when I bought this pack. One of my TikTok viral videos, I'm using this alcohol marker, so it's a little bit nostalgic for me. Okay, then I've got these over here. Just going in and doing my base color, and this one's starting to dry out because I've probably used it so much, but it's still pretty juicy. Alcohol markers do something, they interact with the paper differently than most alcohol marker or most markers. So okay, is that it for the big flowers? I think I got them all. I am gonna go in and do these little flowers just in the interest of time, and I'll give them, they'll all match because they'll all have the base color, but I'll give them a different tone. So maybe I'll add purple or something. But I am kind of an impatient colorer, so I don't like to, especially with really detailed pages, I like to get them all done in one session. This one up here too. Okay, so now I'm going to go in with my mid-tone, and again I'm looking at where, okay, so flowers are a little bit different. The first thing I'm doing is looking at where the shadows are, and I'm also looking at where the color would be pigmented on the flower. So first I'm going to go in and do the shading. So there would be probably right at the base of each petal, there would be a little bit. And then with flowers, there might be just a little bit on the edge, just to pigment the flower a little bit. So I'm doing the same thing here, going in under where the shadows I think would be. And the nice thing about flowers is that they are a natural object. So it doesn't need to be perfect because flowers all look different and they all have a different sort of natural variation to them. So you're not going to worry too much about being perfect with it. I like to do the buds a little bit darker because I don't know if you noticed that about flowers, but sometimes the bud part is a little bit darker, and I always like to add a little edge on my flowers. I feel like I get Bob Ross quiet when I start getting really into the coloring. It's kind of silly. Okay. Let's see, so I'm going to do my little bud. And then I'm just going in under these petals where I think there would be a little bit of a shadow, just cascading. Same here, we'll start with the bud. There would be likely a little petal here, or a little petal shadow. See how there's a little fold right there? And here, same thing, there'd be a little bit of shadow there. You might even want to do that whole thing. And then I'm going to do the tip of the flower. Same thing here. A little tip. Then I'm adding a little bit of shadow there, and then just a little pigment on the tip. And there's a couple little folds here, so coloring those in, starting with the bud. So I know I might sound a little bit repetitive, but I feel like it's easier if you're coloring it at the same time and you're reminded over and over again of what you're doing, that repetition is helpful in learning a new skill. So that's why I repeat myself. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going and doing the bud, and then there's a little bit there, or the little fold there, and then I'm just doing the shadows. Again, the shadows. And then I'm going to do a little bit of the tip. And it's always nice to see your little creation come together when you add the darkest color. That's my favorite part. So a little bit of a shadow there. And then that's going to be a little bit darker. This one's kind of big, so right on the tip there. Same thing here, we're going to do a little bit of a that one's a little messy, but that's okay. Flowers are messy. Alright, so those are all done. I'm going in with my darkest color now, and this is where the magic happens. So I just want to go, just like we did with the hair, I'm going in just to add the darkest shade. I probably won't do much on the tips, just a little bit here and there, just where I think it needs a little more definition. But we're just adding just the deepest part of the shadow. This is where it would have been nice to have a finer tip. And if you have gel pens, you can use gel pens for this as well. Something with a finer tip, or if you had a brush tip, just happen to choose a color that didn't have a brush tip. But brush tip would work really nice for this. See how that just pops? It's much nicer with the little bit of shadow. And you can do this with any color you want. You don't have to pick pink. I just, in my head, I envisioned these being pink. But it would work with reds. If you were doing reds, you might want to do kind of like this, where you choose a pink first, because pink is a light shade of red. And I do a little bit there. And it looks a little bit bland right now, but once we add the greens, I mean, they are starting to pop, but once we add the surrounding colors, it's going to look really nice. Just like I said, when you're doing that, when you're trying to find complementary colors, you really want to add in those other primary colors. And the green will do that, so that's the big one, so takes a little extra time. Just adding the shadows. There we go. Okay, I might add a little shadow there. Oh, got one more over here. And just like we did before with the hair, we're gonna, as soon as we're done here, we're gonna do a little pull back just to see if we're missing anything important. That's what I'm doing now. So I'm just looking it over and seeing like, oh, is there any shadows I'm missing? Don't have much there. And like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. You know what? This might be one that we could add a little gray to as well. So I've got my Ohuhu Natural Gray 5. And I'm just going to add a little bit of shading to my flowers, just to give them a little bit of shadow. I don't even know if I like that, but this is kind of what you could do if you wanted to, because we said that the light was coming from this way, so we're just adding a little bit of extra shadow just to make it look like the light is hitting it a certain way. So we're not going to do a ton. We just want to add a little bit just to give it a little more dimension. It's feeling a little bit flat, so that's all I'm going to do. Jeez, I can never put it down. Perfectionist. Okay. One more and then we're done. Okay. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. So now, like I said, I'm going to do some greenery. And so now I'm going to pick my greens. So I have chosen these 3 greens, and I'll show you what they look like on a separate piece of paper. So that's my light, that's my mid-tone, and this is my dark. So now we're going to do all the greens. And I try not to, so when you're coloring or you're doing anything, and I always tell this to people when I'm doing my custom art as well, is that whatever the main thing is in the picture, you want that to be the focal point. So you don't want, like, I could go in and make all these greens different colors, but she is the star of the show here, her and all these flowers. So I don't want to distract from that, so I'm going to make them all the same color. And for, you know, like I said, I'm impatient. This one's nice and juicy. So again, I'm not worrying about going over the lines here because I'm going to cover that up with other colors later. So I'm going in with my base coat. I'm using my chisel tip for time because it goes a lot faster. And I'm using all the same colors. So I do that with my customer as well. People will say, oh, I want this in the picture, I want that in the picture. And I tell them, you know, like, I could add all of those things, but your house or your car or whatever it is the star of the show. Like, we want that to be the focal point. And if you start adding a bunch of stuff, unless the point of the picture is to have a bunch of stuff, but if your house is, like, if the statement is how beautiful the house is, you want the house to stand out. So same with this picture. I want her to stand out. I want her to be the beauty of the picture. So that's what we're doing. Just adding my colors. Alright, so I've got some little greeneries here. I'm going to switch to my brush tip so I don't end up putting green all over the pink. I still have to do my other flowers, which I have not done yet, but that's okay. See how that's already starting to look better with the complementary color? You know, when it comes to you know, like I mentioned earlier, like, she's supposed to be the star of the show, so I might even stick to just 2 colors for my leaves, mainly because they don't, like, they're not the main thing in the photo, right? Like, nobody's going to be going, oh wow, look at those beautiful leaves. Like, they're looking at her, so I might just stick to 2 colors. Yeah, so now I'm going in with my second color. And so I'm assuming the light's coming from this way. And like to add a little, like this isn't light related, I like to add a little dimension to the leaves. So here we're talking more about shadows. I'm just adding at the base. So a lot of the time the base of a leaf will be darker to begin with, and then so it serves two purposes: to be a bit of a shadow and to also give the leaf some natural look. See how nice that looks? Get it down up here. You can't see that. Go back down here. So see how I'm kind of going up that middle line just to give it a little bit of dimension. You could do all the lines too, but I just like doing the middle line. Whatever you like. You could also do like a tip like that if you wanted to. Depends on what kind of look you're looking for. And I changed my mind. I'm going to do 3 colors because I think it'll look really nice if I add that extra dimension. So here I'm assuming that with seaweed, oftentimes the base of the seaweed is like shadowy because it's all stuck together. So that's what I'm doing here. That's why it's all kind of dark at the bottom. And I think the reason I'm struggling with whether or not I want to add a 3rd color is because I picked a really dark one. So I might have to go in and change my choice. So again, light's coming from this way. I'm adding a bit of a shadow on the side and then at the base. See how much nicer that looks rather than just a flat color. And these ones are kind of in the background, so I'll do a little base shading there. So this one might be all dark on the, because it looks like it's flipped, right? Alright, so then I've got these little seaweeds over here that are just growing out of the rock. And I know some people will be tempted to tell me if I missed a spot or what have you, and I get that. It's annoying when I miss spots. But the point is for you to learn. It's I'm not really worried about whether or not I miss a spot. I just want you guys to learn what you want to know. So we're not going to worry about if I miss a spot here and there. So I'm going to test this out to see if I like it. Yeah, I like that. Okay, it's not too bad. I thought it was going to be too dark. So I'm just, again, like I did in all the other things, or all the other sections, I'm just adding a tiny bit of shade just at the very base, just to make it look like it's really dark in that spot because of the shadow. Same with here. So I might use the brush side for this. So these Ohuhus are brush tip and fine tip. This was, I had bought these ones before I realized what I liked. So in case you're wondering why I have different ones. So this one I'm just adding a little bit of shadow, and I'm assuming that the middle thing would have a tiny bit of a shadow. So like I'm just adding a little bit there. And then this one's overlapped, so I might go like that. Yeah. All right, so then I'm going to do this bottom bit here. And it's just, like I said, it's just the tiny bit. So I'm going to do the bottom first, just so I get all the shading in. And when seaweeds clump together, it tends to be really shady at the base of it. So I'm just gonna go in and do the base first. And then I'll go in and do my shadows. Okay, so now I'm just gonna do a little bit of a shadow, just like this. Not too much. Just adding a little extra dimension. Just a tiny, tiny bit. And again, the light's coming from this way. And that's really like anytime I'm doing art or coloring, I'm always thinking about where I decided the light is coming from. And that's how I make all my decisions on where to put my darkest colors. Okay. So that part's done. So with rocks, I like to use variations of grays. Which I have here. So here are a lot of my grays. I do have, like I said, I have some ohuhus that I don't have in this book yet. So I'm going to use some of those. So please don't be mad at me. So this one is neutral gray 5 in ohuhu. Okay, so I do have variations of cool grays and neutral grays. And the cool grays have a little bit of a blue tone. I don't worry too much about mixing them up. I do like to, when it's a shade shadow, I like to use the cool grays. But I'm going to use, so this is cool gray 5, neutral gray 5, and cool gray 4, which they come from different collections. So you would think that these, because this is a 4, that it would be lighter, but that is actually darker. So that's why these come in so handy, these color charts, because it's hard to figure out what is actually going to look like. Alright, so I'm going to go in with this color here. Okay, so I'm just going in and adding my stone color. Oops. Oh, I went way outside the lines, but we're going to add some background, so I'm not really all that worried about it. I don't know if you're detecting a trend here, but I'm not all that worried about much. Okay, that's done. Just putting my base color on. A lot of people worry so much about the going outside the lines. Every once in a while I get a comment about going outside the lines, and I'm always confused why that's such a big deal for some people. Maybe it's because I'm a done is better than perfect kind of person. I don't know. But some people really don't like it when I don't stay inside the lines, but I usually tell them then they're in the wrong place because I don't stay inside the lines very often. And that's kind of why people like my art, because it's so loose. That's why my clients like my art. Trying to see like what's going on in the background here. Just gonna color this in. You can't really tell what's going on. I don't know if that's leaf or rock. Got a little bit back here too. Okay, that's done. I'm gonna go in. I'm only gonna do 2 colors because I'm realizing that the colors are not really dark enough, like different enough. So I'm just, again, I'm gonna say it till I'm blue in the face. I'm deciding where the light is, and I'm adding some shading to where I think there would be kind of like shadows. I'll do that all there. Doing it with my fine point pen because I think my chisel tip's just a little too big. But over here I'll probably do more chisel, or sorry, not chisel, brush tip. Okay, so here I think I'm just going to go like this. I think there would be shadows on this side. And then I'm just going to do a little bit here and there, over here, just to make it look more realistic. It's hard to tell like which side is which, so I'm just kind of rolling with it. It's not perfect, but I like it. So, and in this, I don't even think there would be much shadow here. I might go like this behind the flowers, but this would be in like direct sunlight, so I'm not really going to worry about that too much. This one might have a little shadow there. That's it. So that's it for the rocks. I think I'm going to do her tail now because I feel like I want to do something fun. So I decided earlier that I was going to do it in blue. So I'm going to pick some blue colors now. Okay, so I've chosen some Ohuhu colors. This is going to be my lightest. It's MG020 blue gray. And then I'm going to go with the cloud blue. And then I'll see how that looks. And then if I want to go a little bit darker, I'll either do this one or a darker color. So that's what we're doing. So this is my nice light blue. And if you're thinking about how you're going to, or when you're adding the color, you're worried about, actually, I'll use my brush tip for this. If you're worried about it showing a little bit like blotchy, or, I mean, alcohol marker is really good for not being blotchy, so you don't have to worry about that too much, but sometimes the color goes on a little bit blotchy. Don't worry about it because a lot of these things have texture. Like she would have texture, her fin would have like probably some translucent appeal to it. So I wouldn't worry about it too much because you want it to look realistic anyway. So, and this, I believe this one is from the Ohuhu pastel set. I love the pastel set. I fought it for a long time, and then finally gave in because I use that almost daily with my art business because I'm doing a lot of homes and cars, and they make really nice base colors. For this first light coat, I almost always, I guess I shouldn't say almost always, but often I use the pastel colors for the first lightest color. Sometimes even the second medium color, because they do have some darker tones. So this one has like these pearls, and I'll show you how to make these pearls look shapely when I'm done this. Like we can make them look a little more round, make them stand out a little bit, or you can just leave them white, but we'll make them look a little round. She's got like a cloth or something hanging here, almost like it's like a wrap, like when you go to the beach. So we'll do that in a different color too. Okay, I got this little spot right here. Okay, so that's her tail. Let's do the next color. Okay, so I'm gonna go again. Our light is coming from this way. This would probably have a little bit of shading in there, inside. Oh, I like how that looks. And then a little bit on this side. And then it might be like this in the kind of in that corner. And then this is the interesting part, because if the light's coming from this way, you might have a little bit of shadow underneath these little pearls. But the shadow is going to be interesting. It's not going to be the same on both sides. I'll show you what I mean in a second. So like here, you might have a little bit there, and then it's going to be a little bit darker there because the light's coming from this way. And then you might have some down here, but not here because the shadow would be on each individual pearl. So here, for instance, the shadow would be probably a little bit darker because of the way it's hitting. And then under here, so I think I'm only going to go with the one color because this one's actually pretty dark. And I don't have this one in my color chart, so I highly recommend having a color chart before you do this. But I might even go here and add a little bit of detail to her fin, like give these guys a little bit of shadow. And then, so here we've got, these are probably, might be casting a shadow on her. Probably not a lot, but I want to make sure I take that into consideration. Okay, and then we've got this. So here I did something a little bit different where I made it look like the light's kind of casting a shadow. Okay, and then here, this is less about shadow and more about like the thickness of the fin. So if the fin at the base, it's kind of like here up at the hair, where it would probably be darker. And then here I'm doing shadow. And then there probably wouldn't be any shadow here because it's hitting the light from this way. Oh, I forgot this part here. There we go. And this might have a little bit of shadow too. And over here, like that. This might have a little bit of shadow. All right, so then I might want to add a little bit there. So I actually kind of like that the way it is, but I feel like it needs a little bit of something. So I'm going to add a little bit of green in there. So this is Green Shadow G420, and this is from the pastel set of Ohuhus. So I'm just going to add a little bit of green just to give it like that sort of turquoisey feel. And this is I think they call this technique sharding. I know that sounds weird, but it's more like where you're kind of just lightly we're sort of adding a little bit of texture. Like her fin is not perfect. It's got a little bit of roughness to it because it's, you know, it's a fish scale. So we're just adding a little bit just so that it doesn't look perfect. I'll probably add a little bit in there like that. So I'm very, very lightly just sort of skimming, and I'll add a little bit here because it would probably be a little darker. And then I'm going to go in and do that too at the tips here. I'm not going to do that one in the corner because it's hard to see, but yeah, so I really like that. Okay, so let's add some dimension to these pearls. So I'm just going to use a light gray. You could go even lighter than this, but I'm going to use my Cool Gray Actually, do I have anything lighter? No, that's lightest. Okay, cool gray 5. So I'm just going to add a tiny bit of shadow, and this is one way that you can make something look round. Just adding a little bit of shadow. To the edges. See how that gives it just a tiny bit of dimension? See the difference between that and that? I think it really makes it come to life. So, and in this respect, you don't necessarily have to follow the shading rules. I mean, you should if you can, but I wouldn't worry about it being like perfect. And I went over the lines a little bit there, but I'm not going to worry about it too much because I don't think anybody's, like when you're coloring, I think if you're doing something like art related, it's more important to get it, you know, kind of, I don't want to say perfect, but in nicer condition, I guess, like less messy. But when you're just doing it for yourself in your own coloring book, it doesn't need to be perfect. Like, it's only you looking at it, so. And we could even go a step further and add another color. Like, go even darker. See how that's changes how it looks? See, that even looks nicer. So now I'm just going to do all of them. And then this little pearl. See how much nicer that looks? Like with the shadow behind it and the dimension. It's like not even the same thing. So we probably could have just gone with this color to begin with, and it would have looked very similar. This will also help cover up those messy colors. And this is a pearl too, so if you think about these little pieces that we messed up, it could just be something that's shadow, like it could be something, you know, reflecting onto the pearl. So that's what I'm going to say it is. Okay, so let's make this into sort of a little jewel. I'm going to use the green that we just used, this green shadow. And I'm going to give this some dimension. So I want to make it look sort of like a little emerald. So I know that's blending in right now, but give it a second. And then I'm going to go in with a different green. Hold on, I gotta find it. Okay, this one's called Glass Green, G8. It's Ohuhu. And then I'm going to go in with my darkest color. And then if you really want to add a nice finish to it, you can take this is a white gel pen, and just add a little highlight like that. Then that makes it nice and glossy looking. Okay, so now I have to do the sand and all these little bits in the background. And then we have to do this up here. So yeah, let's do that. So let's see, let's pick a color. I think I'm going to do these in a red tone. Let's see. I'm going to use this cherry pink. So I'm going to make these red, and then I'll do a darker red to make them look nicer. You could do each individual bubble if you want. We can give them some dimension. And I promised you some wet on wet blending, so we will do that shortly after this. Okay, so I think this is back here too. So I've got a couple of bits that are sort of, I'm not sure what they are in the background, so I'll go in and fix those later. I'm not worried about them right now. My light's changing. So this is going to be a little bit different than what we have been doing. So this is not a super light color because I want these to be a darker red. I don't know why in my head I always imagine these as like a dark red. So it's going to be sort of a dark on, or darker on dark. But very similar. So now I'm going to take like an even darker red. Let's see, this one looks nice. Okay, and I'm just going to add a little bit of dimension. So I'm just adding a little bit of sort of shading around the edges just to make it look more round, and then a little bit on the inside. So I don't want these to stand out too much, but I do want them to look real, or as real as a coloring book can look. So just a little highlight on the inside, right under this lip to make that look round, and then right on the edges. So that's how you can make something look round, is just do a little dark spot or dark line around the edge. Yeah. So they're not standing out, but they do look more lifelike. All right, so now I think I want to do this in a dark pink. Let's see. We have to finish these flowers too. So I think I'll use a purple for those flowers. So now I'm just like doing the finishing touches. These ones don't need to stand out all that much. Because we've already got the other ones standing out, but we could make them stand out as much or as little as we want. And I'll probably go in and change the color of that middle flower, or the middle bit. This, I think it's called the stamen. My light's changing, so my apologies. Okay, so I fixed my lighting a little bit here. So now I'm going to, I think I'm going to do some blending, because I promised you some blending. So let's blend our shirt a little bit. And so earlier I talked about how we're going to pick colors. So we've got some blue here, you know, like this. If you remember the primary trick that I showed you. So we've got these two colors are in the orange, and then we've got some like pink, some like reddish pink there, and then we've got our blue here. So I'm thinking I want to do something in the blue tones or purple-y tones with her top. So maybe we'll do a little of both. So I'm just going to pick some colors here. I will do a blue, I'm going to do a light blue and a purple. And I'll show you how to do a little bit of blending. So I'm purposely gonna pick a little bit of a darker color here. So I've got lavender and pale blue. So there are a couple of ways you can go about this. If you've got a colorless blender, when you're blending alcohol markers, there are two ways that you can do it. If you don't have a colorless blender, you can take your lightest color. So I'm just turning my bird sounds down there. You can take your lightest color and use that as your colorless blender. So the colorless blender is generally, I have actually not done research on this, but from my experience, and I've used it a lot, it seems like it's just there to keep it saturated. Like it seems to keep the paper wet longer, but it also causes it to bleed a little bit more. So sometimes I'll just use like this, the lightest color. So let's do one on one side and we'll do one on the other, and you can see the difference. So I'm just going to go in with my lightest color here, and we want to saturate it pretty nicely. So I'm going up here. I'm just going to do little sections at a time. So this is nice and saturated. And I'm going to quickly move to my purple while it's still wet. That's the critical part. And then I'm going to take this and blend it out. See how it's like significantly saturating? That's the issue when it comes to blending. I'm not going to worry about it right now because I can fix that up. But you can see how that works there. So let's do the other side, this side here. And what I'll do is I'm going to do my lightest color, and I'm not going to go all the way to the edge. Or I will up here because I won't be blending anything out here. But down below, I will stay a little bit further from the edge because we know it's going to saturate, and we don't want to try to avoid errors as much as possible. All right, so we've got our darkest color, and then I'm going to blend it out. So anytime you go over a darker color with a lighter color, it almost has like a sort of bleaching effect. And that one still bled a little bit, but we're going to go in and fix. Okay, so that is without a colorless blender. And then with a colorless blender, you can actually, when this dries, I can go out and clean that up. So I'm not going to worry about that right now. So let's try it with the colorless blender. So this is just the colorless blender. It is, mine's actually a little bit dry. Try the other side. I'm trying to go kind of fast here. Make sure I get it nice and saturated. And then I'll go in with my light color. I notice too when I do the colorless blender underneath, it tends to be a little bit like the color looks a little blotchier. That does lay down a little bit nicer though. I'm just working on that edge there. And then I'm going to go in here. It actually looks pretty good. Just darkening up the darkest spot. So yeah, I would say with the colorless blender, it does look significantly better. So let's keep going. So you'll actually see different tutorials online. You can find different tutorials on how people do this differently. This is how I like to do it. After like a lot of trial and error using a bunch of different methods, this is the one that I like. So if you find something else and you're like, oh, why are you doing it this way? That's why. I'll go in and add my darkest color. Yeah, the lightest color here, or the darkest color, really does look richer when I use the colorless blender. I'm just stretching that color out. Okay, so now I'm going to go in over here and see if I can erase some of this. sometimes you can erase alcohol marker with your colorless blender. It has a sort of bleaching effect. It does take a little finessing. And if you can't totally erase it, you can at least try to lessen the effect. So make it a little less noticeable. Now this is going to be on her skin, so that's the only reason I really care about it. If it was, you know, something else was going a little bit, or going on there that was going to be darker, then I wouldn't worry too much. And you just have to be careful that you don't destroy the paper underneath. That's why I say you have to do a little bit of finessing. So, but we'll make that a little darker and be able to hide those little boo-boos there. So again, I'm not going to worry about it. And this colorless blender is pretty much tapped out, so I might need to get a new one or pull out my Ohuhu. I have noticed a difference though in the Ohuhu. It doesn't work exactly the same, the colorless blender, but you just have to test it and play with it. There. Okay, so yeah, we did a little bit of blending there. I think that looks pretty good. And so now I will go in and add some shadows like we did before. See if I can add a little bit of shading to these little beads to give them a little more character. Not beads, pearls. There we go. And then I'll go in, maybe I'll make that a purple one, since we did, I think I'll add a little bit of pink on the inside. A little bit of purple. It's still wet. You know what, I might add a little purple here just to match it. I'm going to let that dry and then I'll come back to it. Add a little bit here too. Okay, and I'm going to give her some red lips. Actually, I'll give her a pink-red combo. See if we can do a quick blend. Trying to go kind of lightly while it's still wet. Certain colors will blend kind of nicely together even if you don't blend them. So like that blends fairly decent. Okay, so I paused the video and I picked out some colors for her skin. So this is what I've picked out. I've got R19 Barely Beige, Powder Pink, and YR209, and these are from the Ohuhu Skin Tone collection. So I'm going to go in with the lightest color here, Barely Beige. So I picked a color for her sort of brown tones, and so this is like the base skin tone, and then I picked out a color for her, like the brownest tones in her skin and the pinkest tones in her skin. So, and this skin tone collection has some really nice variety. There's not as many dark colors as I'd like, but there is some variety. So if you want to do different cultures, like in this book, there is Black and Indian and Muslim, so you have options with that skin tone selection. So I know you can see some of this purple, but you won't really see it when I'm done. So don't worry just yet. She looks like she's got stress in her shoulders. Oh no! Where did that come from? Oh boy. I don't know where that came from. Okay, so I'm just going in and doing her. I'll fix that after. Probably going to give her green eyes. Okay, so I'm going to try and fix this little mess up right there. It's my dog barking in the background, so I'll just ignore him. I don't even know what this is. If it's marker? I might have to put something on her skin. Well, I'm not sure exactly what happened there, but we'll try to fix it doing something else. Okay, so now I'm gonna, ooh, I forgot her arm. Let's see. All right. So now I'm gonna go in with some browns. Just do some, it's kind of like the shading. You know how like your skin just has some spots that are darker? Like, I might actually blend in the face a little bit. So I'm gonna do her face again, get it nice and saturated wet, like this. And then I'm gonna do some like that. And then go in with my pink. Pink's not really all that pink, it's just a little bit of extra kind of blushing. And I'm just re-wetting the rest of it so that it doesn't leave a water line. Be careful you don't make water lines. Okay, so see how pale her skin is? I'm going to do something similar here. I'm just re-wetting it. Probably should have used my colorless blender, but this is what happens when you're doing this stuff. Your plan sort of changes as you go. There we go. Yeah, and I don't like how that turned out, so I might have to play with that a little bit. But I am going to go in after I'm done and add some shadows, so I think I'll just worry about that later. So you really just are trying to get sort of a variety in her skin. Oops. So I might even do that here. Give her a little bit of a, this is, her belly's meant to be not a perfect, I mean all bellies are perfect, but you know what I mean, not meant to be a muscular belly. She's meant to have, you know, a normal woman's body, not like what you see in brush up magazines. Okay, so I think I'm going to add a little bit more here in her neck. It's almost like I might even go in and add it like as if she's a little bit tan. So maybe we'll do a little bit on her shoulders like this. Just re-wetting it. So we're going to make it look like she's got a little bit of a tan. And I'll all the spots where you would get tan. And then, so that means I want to go, oops, oh boy, I used the wrong marker. Geez, I'm doing good today, aren't I? Okay. That's okay, we can fix it. Can fix just about anything. Okay, so I'm really just saturating the face again, and then I'm going to go in and do a sort of like this, because she's tan. This is the thing about coloring in art too, is that when you're doing it, it can feel really messy, and you see all the mistakes, but when you look at it when it's all finished, you can't really tell. Oops, I keep using the wrong marker. So I'm going to give her a little bit of a tan here too, and maybe we can try and cover up that little blunder. Trying to go fast and it's messing me up. So we're going to just go like this. A little bit of a tan. So I think I'm going to end up having to add something there to hide that. Okay, so I'm going to let that dry for a minute, because it's very saturated. If you can see underneath, it's pretty saturated. So okay, now we're going to go in, and I actually, while I was paused, I decided that I didn't like these flowers, so I'm going to play with them a little bit. So I just picked another color. No, I don't like that either. Okay, I'm going to think about that for a minute, but we have to do this anyway, so I'm going to do this little cloth the same color as her top. But I do think I need to fix the flowers, so. And I'm not going to do the same blending strategy, but I am going to do a little bit of detail. So we're just going in with our base coat, our base color. And something you want to remember when you're using alcohol markers is that it's all about layers. So when I'm doing custom art for clients, it always looks bad until I'm like the final stroke. Basically, it looks, I don't want to say terrible, but it doesn't look great until the final stroke is complete. So you have to remember that it's a process. Sometimes we make little mistakes. So I decided I am going to blend this a little bit because I don't like how that turned out. So I'm just blending it a tiny bit just to get a softer edge. And then, so I'll just go in here and re-wet this. I'm not going to do a full blend, but you can sort of do, it'll blend it on its own a little bit. And I'll just stretch that out. So it's not a, I guess what you call full blend, but just making it a little bit softer. And then I'll just add a little purple there, maybe on that line, just like right on the edge here. Yeah, I wanted it to be a sort of, not messy, but just a you know, a unique little cloth. So I'm just using a little gel pen here just to add some whites to the flowers. I could have just left them white. That's probably what I should have done, but I decided I wanted them to be white, so I'm just using a gel pen. You can also use paint pens for that if you want. Yeah. Okay, so I haven't decided what I'm doing with the flowers yet, but I do have my colors picked for the sand. So I'm going to use sand white. This is an Ohuhu broad tip brush tip, and brown gray from my Belize Suprema. So I'm just going to get that done. And again, I'm not going to worry about these little mistakes. I am going to go in after and add some shading, just to, I find that when I'm doing custom art with alcohol markers, the final stage for me is to add shadows and highlights, and that's usually what really brings the picture to life. So I'm going to do it here and see how we feel about it. I use this one a lot too, so it's getting a little bit dry on me. This is a very common color for houses, for siding and things like that. Use it a lot for cement or dirt. So it's a color that I use a lot. Okay. So then I'm not going to do too much with the dirt. I'm just going to go in and add a little bit of, interest in the dotty areas. The dotty areas? You know what I mean. Just like where there's little dots in the original image. Just so that it looks a little more alive and less flat. Okay. A little bit there. I might add a little bit under this guy too, almost like it's a shadow. Maybe a little bit here. Okay. Then I'm just going to add, I'm just using a couple of grays to do this glucose monitor on her belly. And I did have a little bit of color bleed on the edges, so hopefully this color will mask that a little bit. Yeah, I think that looks okay. And then I might just go in like that. Yep, I think that looks all right. And then I chose a couple of colors for these. I chose light orange 140 from my Belize Suprema for these little guys. So I'm just going to add my little, I'm going to do just a very simple color combo with an orange and like a reddish sort of color. I know I have another one over here. So this will sort of tie in the oranges and the reds. Because I have red and then I have orange. And that should have been sand color. So let me go in and just add a little bit of brown there. Okay. Yeah, and then I'm going to add this color here. This is called Lipstick Neutral. So I guess it's not really red when it's in its like basic color. Let me show you. It's sort of a pinky color, but it's like a brown pink. So I guess it's not really like super red, but I think it almost looks brown on this orange, so I might add, let me grab a red, and I'll do a little dot. I'll do those little dots in red. And then I'll tie in my little red. Here we go. Okay. And something we can do with the background to make it blue but not so overly blue. Actually, I might even do like a turquoisey color. this is Horizon Green. So I'm going to go and just so many markers out now. So what I'm doing is sort of what I call like just a hint of background color. So it's not like you're not going to color the whole thing in. It's just sort of like hinting that there's a background color. So I might do it around some of the edges here. I'm going to switch to my brush pen. So I might do it like around some of the edges. Kind of like that. So we're just sort of hinting that there's a background color, but we're not doing the whole thing. So we'll do that here too, and that's, we can cover up some of our background mistakes doing that. See these little mistakes I made here? So maybe I'll do this whole little section. And then I'll come back in and see I'm covering up that little mistake and that one, and there's a couple little ones here and right here. So they just almost look like shadows now. So it's not a full background, but it's a hint of a background. So I might just go like that. There. Maybe I'll go all the way across the top. So do a little bit above here. And then hide a couple of my little mistakes there. Yeah, so it's just a hint of a background. So then you're not just filling in big blocks of color. So I have a mistake here that is going to drive me crazy. So I'm going to I have a brush pen here, and I'm going to just okay, so it's going to be a little bit of maybe hair. So I'm going to take my orange. Actually, I'll let that dry first. Let that dry. And I'm just going to darken up some of that. Go in with my brighter color here. And add a little bit of detail. And maybe I'll use this for my flower, because I kind of like this color. This is a Copic marker. I don't usually use these for coloring, but I really like this color. I usually only use them for when I'm doing custom art. Sorry, it's hard. Sometimes it's hard for me to talk while I'm coloring. It's like my brain goes into a meditative mode. Yeah, I feel like there was sort of a disconnect there with the blending, so I think this will do it. So I'm just adding a little bit so that it looks some sort of, almost like I was missing a mid-tone. I think that's what it was. I think that looks a lot better. So I could have blended these. These would have been a good section to show you blending on because they're tiny little sections, but it would have taken forever. It's because there's so many of them. See, that looks a lot nicer. And then I'm noticing that I missed a couple spots. I'm going to go in right here like that. And I got a little green spot that I missed right there. Just gonna add a little bit of, it's not the right green, but it's fine. Okay. So then I just have this guy to do. I think I'll do him in yellow. I don't really have any yellow in this picture yet. And then I'll make his body, let's make him orange. And I'll put a little bit of red on him. I'm gonna tie in this orange into his shell so he matches a little bit. And there I was just going around here so that it almost looks like the edge of the shell, like the colors coming out of the edge of the shell. And then I will take a little bit of red, and just give him a little bit of extra color. Maybe just under his belly, maybe just under there. Maybe I'll just give him a little bit there. So he's sort of blending into the background. All right, so she's mostly done. I'm going to add a little bit of pink to her face. That's what I wanted to do originally, but the color I chose didn't work all that well. Just going to give her a little bit of color. Where's my... Now I should have wet that first, but I'm being impatient. All right, well maybe she's a little sunburnt then. I like it though, I think it looks cute. Okay, I'm gonna give her some green eyes. All right, so now I'm just looking to see if there's anything that I'm missing. I'm feeling like these little flowers are looking a little flat, and again, it's because I don't have my 3 shades. I'm used to having 3 shades. They only have 2, and I don't like that. So I'm going to add a little bit of extra color around my flowers. And then we're almost done. I'll add some shading or some shadows and highlights, and then we'll be done. So if you don't have something like a paint pen or a gel pen, you don't really have to worry about it in order to add highlights. You can just leave things white or leave your lightest color at the bottom. So don't worry about it too much if you don't have that. I mean, this is not something you're displaying in a gallery or anything. And that's really something I just learned when I started doing art. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. All right. Okay, so now we're ready to go in and just add some shadows, and this is where it will start really coming to life, I think. Okay, let's let that dry for a second. Okay, I'm realizing too, I didn't do her eyebrows. That should be good for eyebrows. Eyebrows are supposed to be light. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my neutral gray. Actually, that's the wrong color. I want to take this one. My Ohuhu Cool Gray. I think that's 204. I don't know. It's like the Roman numerals for 2. And this is a brush tip. Oh, before I do that, I'm going to fix my little... I have my thing here. Remember we tried to fix it? And then I just need my orange, my light, or my darker orange. So it's not perfect, but if you didn't know I was doing it, you probably wouldn't even notice. And we'll add some shadows and highlights to it so that it will sort of blend. Okay, so now I'm going to add my shadows. So again, we're just like the light's kind of coming from this way, and I'm going in and I'm just adding shadows to everything. So her hair would be shaded, it would be shaded right there. And this is not something that you have to do with your coloring, but I really just want to show you the difference in how it can look. So maybe that would have a shadow, that would have a shadow. She'd definitely have shadow over here. So we're going to go in again in these little areas that are, like, we're not going to go everywhere. We're just going to go where we think. So here, where we think would be sort of the darkest shadows. If that makes sense. I go like that. So this would probably have a little bit of a shadow behind it. Should probably be shaded right here. This side would have more of a shadow than this side. So we're going to go like this. Under here. I know it's looking like a hot mess right now, but just wait till we're done. So then this would probably have a shadow here too. She might have a shadow there. So we're just going in the darkest spots of her hair. She might even have shadow from the other hair. So like this might have a shadow underneath it. So do you see what I'm doing here? How it's like it's kind of overlapping. So there might be some hair that's shading the other hair. It's kind of hard to decide where. You don't have to do a ton of it. So we probably have some shadows here. This would have some shadows. And these would have shadows on top of each other as well. So this one might have a shadow here. These might be a little bit shaded. Like that. And then for the hair, so for instance, this would probably have a little bit of a shadow. We might have a big shadow on this hair because it's overlapping that. Maybe under there. Again, we're remembering the light's coming from this way. So this might have a little bit of shadow. We might even have some overlapping on her shoulder there. This would probably be a little bit shaded. So do you see what I mean about layers? It's always about the layers. Because you might be thinking, why did we do the darkest color then if that's supposed to be the shadow? But the darkest color still plays a role here. Yeah, so I'm thinking that looks good for her hair. She might have a nose shadow, but I've had like mixed reviews with how that looks. So that doesn't look too bad. Okay, so then I'm moving down now. So this would probably have a shadow. There might be some shadows in here, two of them overlapping each other. So this one would probably, this one's overlapping that one, so it might have a shadow, but the light's coming from this way, so there probably wouldn't be much of a shadow there. But these might have a shadow on the rock. And then this would probably be shading that. There'd probably be just a little bit on this edge here. That. This might have a little bit of shading on the edge from that one. And then these would definitely be shadowed. And then this is probably on the rock there. These would probably have a pretty big shadow. And then these would have shadows on each other. And I'm not going to get too worried about these because they're not, like, nobody's really looking at them. And they're already pretty shaded with this dark green. So I'm not going to spend too much time on them. But these, so again, the light is coming from this direction. This direction. So if the light's coming from here, then there might be a shadow there. Definitely be a shadow there. On that side, like that. Okay, so now let's look at her tail and the flowers there. Actually, you know, I'm going to do this little guy first. So he'd probably have a little bit shadow there and there. And definitely under there. And definitely under him. Okay, so now I'm looking at her tail. And I'm looking at, actually, you know what? This might have a shadow on it from her arm. I'm looking at the flowers and her tail. So this might have a little bit of a shadow here. Here. Maybe there. Now her tail's behind the rock, so there probably wouldn't be much of a shadow, but there might be like a stretching shadow like this. Probably be a shadow here and here. And then these overlapping each other would definitely have a shadow on them. And I took a little picture before we started doing this, so I will post when I'm done the difference so you can see. Because watching it come together is different than actually seeing the final product like side by side. So this would probably be like that. We'd probably have a little shadow there. Sometimes you can make up a little like it's casting a shadow. That's always fun to do. Okay, so then again, I'm remembering where the light's coming from. Sometimes when I'm doing custom art too, I will do like layers of shadows, sort of like the light, medium, dark. You know how I have the light, the mid-tone, and then the dark? I do that as well with my shadows and stretch the shadows out, but I'm not going to do that today because coloring, this is not custom art. Okay, so this would likely have a shadow here. And then this one would be, so the light's coming from this way, so we'd have shadow here for sure. These would be casting a shadow. And this one is probably be casting a shadow further down here, but not all the way. Shadow, that might have a shadow in there. These ones would definitely have a shadow. This might have a shadow as well on top of those. That. And then she would be casting probably quite a bit of a shadow. So I'm gonna actually do quite a bit over here, because this whole side would probably be like she'd be casting a shadow on these rocks here. and on all of this stuff. So I'm going to actually color this all in. Okay, and then she would probably have a shadow starting about there on her tail. That might be shadowed. And then these would all definitely have shadows. This is, for me, this is my favorite part of any sort of art or coloring, is adding the shadows, because it's really when it starts to come to life, when it turns into a piece of art instead of just a thought. So these would probably be casting a shadow on each other. That might be, probably have a little bit of a shadow on it. That would definitely have a shadow on it. Can be hard to decide sometimes where to put the shadow, so don't be hard on yourself. That would have a shadow there. Definitely. Okay. So that's looking pretty good. This would probably have a shadow. Oh, I think that was my dog snoring, I think. Some shadows in there. Almost done. Oh, I think my dog just farted. Oh my god. Oh, that's funny. That's the bonus material. Okay. And this would have a shadow. Probably a little bit like there too, like that. All right, I think that's pretty good. I don't think we need to go much deeper than that. So that's it. I might, this is not something that you have to do, but I might even go in and add some little highlights. Like this. Like wherever the light would be hitting. This is a way that you can add some extra details to your coloring. You don't have to do this, obviously. This is definitely, what's the word I'm looking for, optional. But it does add a nice, I'm just going to do it so that you can see how it can add a nice little detail just to finish off a piece. You might want to go like that with your little pearls. So this is what I do with my art. So again, you don't need to do it if you're coloring, but it does add a little bit of extra detail and extra intrigue, I guess is the word I'm looking for. So I wouldn't do it everywhere, just in little spots where you might have a little bit of glow. So maybe on her tail here, this little shell. That's my phone's buzzing, not my dog farting. Okay. Can't believe he did that. That's so funny. All right. I think that's probably good. Do like a little bit of that too. See, I always say that's good, and then I see something else, excuse me, that I want to add. It's a good way to cover up your mistakes too. Yeah, I think that's good. All done. Okay, so that is my first tutorial on how to do coloring with alcohol markers. See, I always do that. I think I'm done, and then I see something else that I could add to it. Okay, so that's your final, or that's your first alcohol marker tutorial in my Patreon. So if you like this, please let me know, and I will be working on my audio quality. So if this is not, if it's bothering you, that just know that that's something that's on my radar. So, and adding some highlights here, like I said I would. See, you can barely even tell that it's not supposed to be there if you didn't know. So, okay, enjoy.